Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Mets Daily on the Fan Arch Network. John Saponaro here with you today and every day to talk about our New York Mets. But of course, before we get started, a quick shout out goes to our friends over at Kalshi for sponsoring the video. And remember, if you haven't already, now is the perfect time to subscribe to the channel to make sure that you never miss an episode. We're sitting at just over 4,000 subscribers, and we would love to get to 5,000 by the end of the 2026 baseball season. Now, without further ado, right into it as the New York Mets play another clean and tidy game, which I know some of you don't want to see, but I have been saying this entire time that I am still looking forward to. Maybe because I'm a fan, maybe because, or the type of fan that I am, I should say, maybe because I'm looking forward to 2027 and I want to see good effort from players who are going to be here. Maybe it's because I sit down and I do this show 5 days a week, and then I do Till Mets Do Us Part 1 day a week, and I don't want to sit here and hit record and talk to you about doom and gloom and bad baseball. I think we've all seen enough bad baseball over the first few months of the season. So when games like this happen and Mets get good wins against good teams and they take series the way that they did against Philadelphia, stuff like that is important to me. And how they go about doing it is going to matter as well. Zach Thornton, who we'll talk about coming up in a little bit, was a big part of it. And again, when you're talking about the future, you're talking about 2027 and 2028 and beyond, these are the little things that you want to take away. But quickly on the game itself, it seemed like the Mets and the Brewers, in a way, sort of swapped roles, or maybe playing against the Brewers rubbed off on the Mets a little bit, because what the Mets did in this game last night was play clean, tidy baseball. They played good defense by and large. They got great pitching. They got timely hits. 4 runs, 13 hits is not sort of the average that you would like to see in terms of being able to cash in on some of those opportunities. A lot of traffic on the bases, but they got enough hits. They got the hits that they needed when they needed, and that's something that a good baseball team would do. You don't always cash in on all opportunities. We all know that. And the Mets did enough to win this game, taking the victory 4-0, shutting out the Brewers. And again, very impressive fashion considering where the Brewers are in their season, where the Mets are in their season, and where each of these teams are record-wise going in opposite directions. Couple things I want to point out from this game before we talk about Zach Thornton specifically, and that's Zach with a C, by the way, Z-A-C, no K, no H, drop the H. He has transformed. He has gone through a metamorphosis, and shout out to him for doing it. I love when athletes are like, hey, actually, just like Pete Alonso did this years ago when he was coming up. He was Peter Alonso, and he was like, you guys can just call me Pete. Like, but anyway, I digress. A lot of things that you really love here. The solo home run that set the tone from Jared Young early in the game broke the scoreless tie. The great catch by Ewing playing left field for the first time in his major league career, and it was a great catch. Carson Bench with a clutch 2-run hit that was able to, really put the game out of reach, which is crazy at a 3-0 game, but it was a big difference maker. There was also a huge tone setter and a huge insurance run by Luis Robert Jr. that we'll talk about in a little bit. But I did want to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about Francisco Lindor, because like I said a couple days ago, the reports of his demise have been greatly exaggerated, because you look up and all of a sudden Francisco Lindor has another 3-hit game. That's 7 hits in 3 games. You add in the walks, and he's been on base 10 times in his last 3 games. One of those games was against the guy who's probably going to win the Cy Young in Jacob Misiorowski. And I understand he only went 1 for 4 in that game, but you know what? Lindor has been doing what Lindor does. Lindor is a great baseball player, and I am happy that Lindor is a New York Met. Now let's get into some of the particulars from this game, and we have to start with the starting pitcher, Zach Thornton, the aforementioned ZAC. Zach, not Z-A-C-H, as he was previously known. What a start for this young kid. He comes up. He does exactly what the Mets need at every turn so far. He is now fully entrenched in this rotation. He's not going to go anywhere barring injury, because the Mets are going to sell off some pieces. The Mets are going to trade Freddie Peralta. The Mets might try to find a way to trade Kodai Senga. If they can't, they might just get him off this roster. We'll see. The Mets might trade Clay Holmes. We'll talk about that in the final segment. So Zach Thornton is on this rotation right now, and there's no reason to think why he won't finish the season in this rotation, and he absolutely deserves it. Credit to him for picking up his win, his first major league win in this game, again, against a good team, a team with a good lineup, a team that is relentless offensively, a team that wins in their ballpark. And he went out there and he shut them out for 6 innings. You look at the line, 6 innings pitched, no runs on 3 hits with a walk, only 2 strikeouts. But again, strikeouts are not a big part of Zach Thornton's game. He's not this plus stuff guy. He's a little bit of a throwback to the crafty lefty, if you will. Look, everybody in the major leagues has good stuff, but he's not a stuff guy. He's a control guy. He's a pitcher who knows how to pitch, who's not afraid to throw strikes. And you see that in everything that he does, in every start that he's had so far. It has been evident. But it's just, you look up now, and it's a very small sample size, but he's got an 18-inning scoreless streak, and he's got a 1.93 ERA on the season. And all of a sudden, there is a little bit of a building block here. Look, Christian Scott and Nola McLean are the sexy ones. Christian Scott and Nola McLean are going to give you the stuff. They're going to give you the vibe when you look at them, potential top of the rotation guys, especially McLean. And again, I don't want you to confuse Zach Thornton with them. He is not that type of pitcher. He is not that type of prospect. He is not touted that way. There were even people in the minors who are having worse seasons, Jonah Tong, Jack Wenninger, Jonathan Santucci, that profile as different kinds of pitchers, that profile as better prospects than Zach Thornton. It's not a knock on the kid. I don't want anybody in the comments to jump down my throat and say, like, Tong can't even get outs in the major leagues, and here's Zach Thornton with his 18-inning scoreless streak and his 1.93 ERA. I understand that completely. It's about the results at the end of the day, and if he continues to get them, there's no issue. It's just to say that he is not of the same physical specimen. He is not the same type of pitcher that some of the other guys who I mentioned are. Of course, McLean, Scott, Tong, even Santucci. Wenninger is, I think, maybe a little bit closer in terms of you're looking at a guy who's got a floor of being a back of the rotation starter, and I think that's what you're looking at here with Zach Thornton. So it's a great issue to have, though. You want guys with different kinds of stuff. You want guys with variance. You want guys who can spin it. You want guys who can throw hard. You want guys who are left-handed. You want guys who are right-handed. You want guys with a high arm angle. You want guys with a low arm angle. The more variance you can do, the more trickery you can do, it just helps you. It's not the be-all, end-all, but it helps. We've seen that it helps. That's why teams deploy openers, and the opener, looks like, crazy arm slot coming from the left side for an inning or two. And then all of a sudden they bring in a guy who's over the top, throwing right-handed, throwing hard. And it's just the way you mix it up. It's the way you vary it. Any little thing that you can do, these hitters in the major leagues are so good. Any little thing that you can do to give your team an advantage is important. And Zach Thornton is just doing everything. I think he is a big-time benefit, obviously, to this team, but he's now entrenched himself firmly in the conversation of the future of this rotation with the New York Mets. So it's not a bad place to start. You have Christian Scott, you have Nola McLean, you have Zach Thornton, you've got Jonah Tong and Jack Wenninger and Jonathan Santucci all in the minors. You've got Carson Wiggins, who you just signed, who's probably a couple years away, but you just have the building blocks of what can be really solid major league rotation as soon as next year. And we know how the rotation sunk this team last year. It was the biggest issue, even though the offense went away for spurts. And this year, while the offense was really the biggest culprit, couldn't get out of their own way in April and most of May, once the starting pitching went into the tank the way that it did, that's what was really the death knell for this team. I saw somebody say it on Twitter, how can the Mets look like the worst team in baseball one day and look like they can win a World Series the next? And it's very simple. It's 2 words: starting pitching. I know it's a cliche. Your team is only as good, momentum is only as good as the next day's starting pitcher, but it's true. And when you got guys who can go out there and give you 6 innings, shutout baseball, 6 innings, 2-run baseball, keep you in the game, it looks a lot different than when you have Freddie Peralta go out there and give you just over 5 innings and give up 7 runs. And I know some of those runs were inherited runners that scored, but it's night and day. It's absolutely night and day. And it is nice to see, again, progress, development, and future in a season that is otherwise lost. So shout out to Zach Thornton once again for picking up his first major league win. Many more to come, hopefully. Baseball season is here, and now you can trade every game on Kalshi. And you know what I do? I sit down to record this show. Before I do, I head on over to the Kalshi app, and I look at where you could find some fun, interesting value. And what I like is Francisco Lindor to hit 1 home run or more, but 1 home run. That is trading at 18 cents a share, which means that $100 will get you $525. Lindor is hot right now. We talked about it. 7 hits in his last 3 games. He's got a home run in there. He's got some extra base hits. He's been on base 10 times. He's seeing the ball well. He is really doing some things from both sides of the plate that look really good. And now they're going up against the pitcher in Logan Henderson today, who is good. He's got some good stuff, but, young pitcher, ability to make a mistake. And you don't want to make a mistake to Francisco Lindor, not when he's going like this. He's just in one of those grooves. So I think there's really good value there at 18 cents a share. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there is no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy into and out of your position. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use the code FANARCHBASEBALL to get $10 when you trade 10 Kalshi. Trade on anything. Must be 18 and over. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risks and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. There's a lot of things that we can talk about with regards to this game. I didn't want to spend a whole segment on Francisco Lindor because we've talked about him so much. That's why I kind of glossed over him when we looked at the overview of the game and didn't spend a ton of time on what we're about to talk about, which is Luis Robert Jr. comes back, second game off of the IL, and hits a mammoth monster shot. I mean, when you talk about home runs that are majestic, you talk about bombs, you talk about the long ball, you talk about a sexy home run, you are talking about the home run that Luis Robert Jr. hit in the 8th inning, and it shows you the talent that this guy has, and it just shows you how unfortunate it's been, not only for the Mets, but for his major league career, that he has not been able to stay healthy, because this guy is just so gifted physically. He is just insanely strong, insanely fast. Just the athletic ability that he offers is off the charts. And this is why it's important to showcase guys like this. Now, Luis Robert Jr., unfortunately, the way things went, he is not going to be a part of the Mets' plans beyond this season. And I think the Mets are going to look very aggressively to trade him, as we've talked about on the show before, and I think that they should. And part of that means that they have to play him, which is going to give us some lineups we don't necessarily want to see, where Benj has to sit one day and Ewing has to sit one day, and one of these guys has to go to the corner outfield, and we've got Soto has to sit, or go, excuse me, not sit. Soto's never going to sit. Soto has to DH, which means that Polanco has to sit. You're just going to see some things that you don't really want to see, and I understand that. But like we talked about on yesterday's show, it's not going to be the be-all, end-all for this team. It's not going to hinder Benj's development. It's not going to hinder Ewing's development. And this is why you have to give these players who you're trying to trade, especially the ones coming off of injury, a little bit of run, because two things really that Luis Robert has always done in his career, whether he's performing like an MVP or basically a replacement level player, that is play defense in center field, which is extremely valuable, and hit lefties, which is extremely valuable. And for a team looking to acquire some outfield help, whether that's in the corners, whether that's in center, whether that's in a platoon, he can offer something. If the Mets pay down this deal, a blast like this, a home run like this, is showing you that he's capable, that he's got it, that he is not in the midst of a lost season, that yes, he lost a lot of time to the IL, but if he's healthy now, he can get hot, he can help your team, he can go on a run. And we saw that during July last year what he did for the White Sox. He went on an absolute tear for a month. So this is a guy who's done it before and can be valuable to a team not named the New York Mets. And I think that's important because you got to remember, the Mets got a prospect, a legitimate prospect for David Peterson with a 6 ERA. If they're willing to eat the rest of this deal, they will be able to recoup something. I don't know what, and I don't know necessarily from whom, but I think that someone out there who is trying to win, a team that is either trying to add on the margins or trying to win on the margins, a team that maybe can't afford the splashier move but wants to make a savvy move. I think there's going to be a market for Luis Robert Jr. So I think when you go out there and you hit a home run 451 feet at over 112 miles an hour, and you have players in the Mets dugout picking up their jaw off the floor, I think that's good. And look, it's still just it's 1 for 4 or 1 for 5 day for Luis Robert Jr., right? I'm not trying to make it sound like he had some unbelievable day. And one hit, one home run does not a great season make, does not a great player make. I understand that. But when you do stuff like this, you do, especially this time of year, when people are looking, people are scouting, you kind of remind everybody who the hell you are. And that's only going to be good for the New York Mets. Now, in this final segment, I thought we were going to talk about something else. And it's a good thing I waited to record. Sometimes I'll wait to record in the morning because I want to see, especially this time of year, news comes out fast and furious and reports come out. And a couple weeks ago when the Mets fired Mendoza, I had a show that already dropped. And then I had to sit down and kind of record another show and get an extra show in on Saturday. And that's just how things go sometimes. And when you're in the trading season, reports are going to come out fast and furious. And one that I saw this morning via Will Salmon and Ken Rosenthal on The Athletic, which again, if you're going to trust somebody, trust Will Salmon. He reported initially that the Mets were interested in offering Clay Holmes an extension, that he was open to talking an extension midseason. Obviously, Clay Holmes has been on the IL for a while. He's working his way back to a rehab. He may or may not get on the field before the trade deadline. Looks like he won't, but that hasn't stopped teams from acquiring starting pitching before. And now they are reporting, Will Salmon and Ken Rosenthal, that the Mets are more likely to trade Clay Holmes than extend him at this point. And that is completely counterintuitive to the report that came out just a few days ago by the same folks. So the question now becomes what changed? And honestly, one of two things has changed if this is the case. And again, I believe Will Salmon's reporting. This can be one of two things, and they're not mutually exclusive. It could be both. The Mets and Holmes sat down, talked about the parameters of an extension, and they have decided that they can't come to terms on one. Holmes wants too much, Mets want to give something less, and so it goes. And, or, the Mets are receiving so many calls on the availability of Clay Holmes that they know that they can deal this player for something significant despite the injury. Because let's be honest, if Clay Holmes didn't get hurt, he would be the best trade chip the Mets could offer in a year where Freddie Peralta is just an absolute mess. So I think that those two things, both of them could be possible. And I think that it could just be changing the trajectory of where the Mets are. Now, I will say this. I've mentioned on this show that I would extend Clay Holmes. I think somewhere between $60 and $75 million a year, over the total life of the contract gets it done. So think like 3 years, 60, which would be $20 million a year, to 3 years, 75, which is obviously $25 million a year. I think it's somewhere in that range, but I could be wrong because I'm not negotiating. I'm not in the room, but I think that would be a fair value deal. And I think it's important for the Mets to retain Clay Holmes. So this news this morning comes as a little bit of a surprise and a little bit of a disappointment, if you will, because it's not where I would go if I were running things, especially if it's coming down to the fact that the Mets and Clay Holmes just can't line up on value. Because look, if Clay Holmes wants a 5 or 6 year deal at this point, that's something that's probably not prudent to do if you're the New York Mets. But again, if he's living in that 3-year deal and you want to give him 20 and he wants 25, I don't really want that to be the stumbling block. And that would bother me from a perspective of David Stearns has drawn hard lines in the sand on most starting pitching deals, and the starting pitching has blown up in his face each and every single time. You have a guy here who they got under market value, who they believed in, who they helped develop as a starter, who has succeeded in New York with the Yankees and now with the Mets, who wants to stay here, presumably. At that point, you do need to try to keep this person. So if it's something where they just can't come together on a deal, and that is the driving force behind trading him, I don't like it. If it's more the other portion, I still don't like it because I'm in favor of keeping him. But if there's this thought process that like, man, we are out here and we cannot put the phone down about Clay Holmes. We call teams, we talk to teams about Freddie Peralta, and they're like, yeah, but what about Clay Holmes? If that's the case, you have to be a little less mad. Now, I'm not a prospect hugger. I'm not a prospect guy. I'm a Major League Baseball fan. I want to watch the Mets. I want the Mets to be good, but I understand that this is how teams are going to operate. When you have commodities to sell and it's a seller's market and you're the person, you're the one team who has these pieces, who is definitely not trying to compete for the rest of the season, and especially on expiring contracts, which is what Clay Holmes is right now, I understand the value in that. I really do. This is not where I would go, and we'll see where the Mets ultimately do go. Again, I thought that it was really important for the Mets to try to retain Clay Holmes and Bo Bichette. They may retain both. They may not retain either. They may keep Bichette and not Holmes. I have no idea where this is going to go. I do not think Bo Bichette's going to get traded at the deadline. I think Bo Bichette's going to be an offseason decision, whether he opts in, opts out, whether they keep him or they don't. I think that's something that we'll see and we'll talk about plenty in the future. But this Clay Holmes report is certainly interesting now. And I think it does point to the fact that teams are desperate for starting pitching and teams really like what they've seen from Clay Holmes, even though he has been sight unseen for the last several weeks, even though he's been a guy who's been on the injured list going back 6-8 weeks. So I think when you look at the landscape of where the Mets are, where this trading season is trending, they just might be in a position where there's an offer that's too good to refuse. But remember, whether they trade him or not, whether the reports come out to the positive, to the negative, whether the reports come out that they're going to keep him, whether these reports keep shifting, you got to trust the sources that are reliable. And Will Salmon, excuse me, and Ken Rosenthal, but Will Salmon especially, have been extremely reliable. When Will says something, listen. That's going to do it for this episode of Mets Daily. If you haven't already, once again, subscribe to the channel as we're trying to get closer and closer to 5,000 subscribers before the end of the 2026 baseball season. Until next time, I'm John Saponaro. See you tomorrow.